Okay, today we're going to talk about activities you can do in the classroom or at day camps, and you don't even have to be in the garden. So these are like gardening and nature activities you can do inside, outside, whatever. So the first thing I do is so many kids have no idea where their food comes from. But the first thing I do is we talk about, how plants are important to our lives. We eat them, we build houses out of them, we get medicine from them. So the first thing we do is we talk about hamburgers, okay? And we talk about how every ingredient in a hamburger either is a plant or there was a plant involved at some step of the way. So we draw a hamburger, an exploded version, and we draw the bun. And we color it in and we talk about what is the bun made of. And the bun's made of wheat or rye or whatever they want to eat. And wheat is a plant, and we talk about how it grows. It grows in the ground. Some kids around here have seen wheat growing. They harvest it with the combine. So we talk a little bit about that, but that's definitely a plant. Some buns have sesame seeds, so we talk about how those are plants. Then we talk about the beef patty or the soybean patty, depending on who your audience is. And if it is a beef patty, where does beef come from? All right, it comes from cattle. And same with cheese. Cheese comes from milk, also comes from cattle. So cheese and beef come from a cow. Cow eats plants. So even though you're eating beef and cheese, you're still eating something that plants had something to do with. We talk about the tomato and how it's a plant and how it grows on a bush and how you can pick them right off when they're red and eat them, because a lot of kids have no idea how their food grows, much less what their food is. We talk about lettuce and how you can get leaf lettuce, you can get head of lettuce, there's different kinds of lettuce, but they're plants and they grow on top of the ground. We talk about onions and how they're a plant and how they grow. And pickles, a lot of kids don't realize that pickles come from cucumbers. Some kids think cucumbers come from pickles. Anyway, we talk about that. We talk about the ketchup and the mustard and the mayo. And the mayo is made out of vegetable oil and eggs. Well, where do we get eggs from? Chickens, all right? What do chickens eat? Sometimes they eat plants, sometimes they eat bugs that eat plants. But it all goes back to plants. And then when we talk about ketchup, we talk about how it's tomato-based, but a lot of ketchups have corn in the form of high fructose corn syrup. But all of that, those are all plants. So for the activity to go with it, I made a class demo size hamburger. And as we talk about all the ingredients, we can dissect the hamburger. All right, so we have the bun and the cheese made from milk, comes from a cow. Cows eat plants. We take pipe cleaners and bend them in to make little onions. Sometimes we use purple ones, sometimes we use yellow ones, sometimes we use white ones, just so the kids realize not all onions are white. We have a blob of ketchup, which is made from plants. We have a blob of mustard. We have a blob of mayonnaise. We have some pickles. We have a couple tomatoes, and this is a piece of lettuce. It's just a piece of like mesh. Then we have our burger with the sizzle marks on it. And so while we talk about the different parts of a hamburger and where it all comes from, the kids can be making their own hamburger. So with this, I give each kid plain, like square, different colors of felt. And I make sure that the piece of felt I give them isn't much bigger than what they're going to end up cutting out to save money. And also, for some reason, if you give a kid a big square of felt, they come up the middle and cut out the middle, and that's a big waste of fabric. So I just give them enough felt to do what they need to do. So they start out with the bun, and they put little sesame seeds on it if they want to. Then they take their hamburger patty, and they can take a Sharpie and put little sizzle marks. They like doing that. Here's the lettuce, and we talk about it's a plant and where does it come from. And then we cut out some tomatoes. Some kids just put red circles. Some kids want to cut out the juicy part. We have our pickles. and our ketchup, mustard, mayo, onions, and top it off with some cheese and the other bun. And then the kids can go home, put that in a little Ziploc bag, the kids take it home, and they can tell everybody in their family where their food comes from and how it all comes from plants. All right, so after we talk about where our food comes from, the next thing we do is we talk about what plants need to grow, because now we know they're important to us for food, fiber, fuel, and so we need to know what plants need to grow. So we write the acronym PLANTS, and then the kids guess. These all start with something a plant needs. So what are some guesses? And the kid might say sun, and it's like, yeah, it needs light, so you spell out the light. And the kids are also drawing one of these along the way. And so they wrote plants, then they guess, what else does a plant need? And some kid will say like fertilizer. So you're like, right, let's all write nutrients. And then if you want to, you could talk about, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, depending on the age of your kids. All right, then they'll guess some more, and P is place. So do they need to be in the sun, the shade, part sun, part shade, right? Do they grow in sandy soils or clay soils? So you talk about place. S can stand for soil, but not all plants need the soil to grow in the case of hydroponics. So a lot of times I say it can also mean space, because whatever plant you're using has certain space needs. You can grow 16 radishes to a square foot, but you're not going to grow 16 tomatoes in a square foot. So then we talk about how plants need different amounts of space. And the last one's kind of tricky. They can't figure out what the T stands for, but they know plants need water. So T actually stands for thirsty. All right, so then they know that plants need plants to grow. Then at some point we talk about the 6 parts of a plant, and then they number 1 to 6. And we talk about not only does their food come from different parts of the plant, but there's 6 main parts of a plant. So the first thing we talk about is roots. All right, what do roots do? Well, they anchor the plant, they help bring in water and nutrients. All right, stems, that's the middle part of the plant. That's where water goes up and down and the nutrients go up and down, and they also support the plant and help it stand up. Another part is leaves. So leaves help capture the sun. They use the sun for photosynthesis, that big word, and that makes their food, because plants make their own food. Plants make flowers. A lot of them do when they want to reproduce. So flowers, and we actually eat some flowers. We actually eat broccoli and cauliflower. You're actually eating flower buds. And leaves would be lettuce. Stems would be like asparagus. So you can talk about the different parts of the plant and food that we get from those. All right, flowers turn into fruit when they get pollinated. So examples of fruit, anything that has a seed, so like watermelon, tomatoes, cucumbers, oranges, all right? And then inside the fruit are the seeds, which is what's gonna be the baby plants that grow up. They start as seeds. All right, now there's a song that we sing about the 6 parts of a plant, all right? And the kids all stand up and act it out, so if you got kids that are kind of fidgety, this is a good time to do this. So again, you talk about the roots and what they do, and you say roots, and you bend down and touch your toes. And then you talk about what stems do and how they support the plants, and how if there's not enough water, they wilt. And then you talk about leaves. This would be leaves, and they catch the sun. Flowers is what a plant makes to reproduce a lot of times. And then fruit is represented by, like, if you just harvested a bunch of apples off a tree and you're carrying a big pile of them. And then seeds are in the middle. So the song that goes along with this is the Addams Family song, or some kids don't know that, but they know the Days of the Week song. So it's the same tune, all right? So you go parts of the plant, parts of the plant, parts of the plant, parts of the plant, parts of the plant. There's roots and stems and leaves, flowers, fruit, and seeds. You roll them all together, you got the parts of the plant, parts of the plant, parts of the plant, parts of the plant, parts of the plant. So after they all wind down from that, they're usually ready for a snack. So the next thing we do is we go over and we have a food tasting. So this is a food tasting grid, and the kids are going to use their 5 senses to judge new fruits and vegetables. And most kids, pretty much all the fruits and vegetables they've had is either applesauce, ketchup, which is the tomatoes, chopped up iceberg lettuce, apple juice. So a lot of kids have never tasted a blueberry or a strawberry, and a lot of them have never tasted or heard of a jicama or a kiwi. So what we do with this, because if you try to give a kid a new piece of food, they'll be like, I don't like it. Well, they haven't even tried it or given it a chance. So this is how we give them the ability to give new foods a chance. Normally, I find different colored versions of standard. So normally, I would give them purple carrots or yellow cauliflower, something to throw them off. Chocolate colored tomatoes. Try to throw them off. So if they think they know what it is, they're not 100% sure because they've never seen a purple carrot. So anyway, normally I don't use strawberries because a lot of kids are allergic to them. And before we do this activity, I make sure that there's no allergies to anything I'm getting ready to give them. So I just have them write down the color of the fruits or veggies they're just getting to try out. Because I don't want any preconceived notions. Oh, I know that's a strawberry. You know, I don't. And I tell them, if you know what it is, don't say. So what I have them do, and I say we do this all at the same time, is I say, okay, we're going to do the red. So nobody stick it in their mouth yet. We're going to go in order here. And the first sense we're going to use to judge this unknown is sight. All right? So we're going to look at it. And they understand what grades are. So on a scale of A to F, not thinking about anything about how it tastes or your preconceived notion, how would you grade this? Yours is going to be different than everybody else's. You might not like the color red. You might think this is really weird looking and you don't like it at all. Whatever you think, there's no wrong answers. So I'm going to give it an A because I really like how it looks. The next thing you do is smell it. And remember, we're all doing this as a class at the same time, so nobody's like making any reactions. So you smell it, and you grade it based on smell. Now, I really like this, so I'm going to give it an A. But some people don't, so they might give it an F. There's no wrong answers. We're going to do this next 3 kind of in the same time. So we're going to have the feel of it in your mouth, the sound of it when you crunch down on it. So is it like, does it feel slimy or crunchy? Does it sound crisp or, slimy? Does it even have a sound when you bite into it? And then finally the taste. So first you put it in your mouth. And how do you like the feel in your mouth? Well, I don't really care for the feel as much, but I still like it. And I don't think there's really much of a sound, and that doesn't really bother me, but I'll give it a C. It's kind of neutral. And then the taste. So to me, and only me, how do I think it tastes? Now, I like this, so I'll give it an A. So then I ask the kids, does anyone know what this is? And some kids will be like, I know what it is. It's a strawberry, and some kids will have tasted it and some kids will have never tasted it. And so then I can say, if you didn't like it, which part did you not like? So then they can say, like, I didn't like how it sounded. Okay, well, now you just didn't say, I don't like it. You say, I didn't like how it sounded. So now you've actually given it a try, and you've judged it, and you can say the reason you don't like it is. But most of the kids, there's only a few kids that don't like different fruits or veggies, and most kids are like, oh, I never had a whatever before. So this is a chance for you to get them to taste like jicama, kiwi, rutabaga, all kinds of stuff. Just make sure on some fruits, like with the jicama, you have to take the skin off. because it'll make you sick otherwise. So tell them what it is. If you want to, you can go into where it came from, how it got here, what cultures use it the most, how do they eat it. This is a chance for your kids from different backgrounds to say, oh, we eat jicama and this is how we eat it, or this is what we do with kiwi. So it can lead to a lot of different discussions, but this is a way to get them to eat a healthy snack and possibly explore something new along the way. All right. The next thing we're going to do, and they're not all, this is not necessarily the order that we do it in. But I'm just going to run through a few activities, not necessarily in any particular order, but just some activities. And I like to use activities that are inexpensive and that have easy to find materials. And when I was a classroom teacher, our budget was $0, so I really looked for the shoestring stuff. All right? So one thing that kids really like is carnivorous plants. And one of those carnivorous plants is a Venus flytrap. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a Venus flytrap puppet. So the first thing I do is we take a regular, the cheaper the better, paper plate. And the side that you eat on, I have them just color it red. This isn't the time to be a perfectionist, just make it red. And while they're coloring it red, we talk about why is the inside of a Venus flytrap red? Well, what do Venus flytraps eat? Well, they eat insects and other unfortunate animals that happen to be nearby, like frogs and stuff. But it's red to attract animals to it. All right, they are naturally found in the bogs of the Carolinas, and the bogs don't have many nutrients. So the Venus flytraps still have chlorophyll to make sugars with, but they're kind of in a darker area, and for fertilizer, about the only thing you can do is attract insects to you and eat them. So after they get that turned red, we turn the bottom of the plate and we color it green. And the reason it's green, like we talked about, it performs photosynthesis. And to perform photosynthesis, you need chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is green. And that's why a lot of plants, most plants, are green. All right? So, before I give this to them, I either take an X-Acto knife or I punch a little hole where their fingers are going to end up, because the next thing they're going to do is take their scissors and cut little holes where their fingers are going to end up. And if I don't cut it beforehand, they're going to jab themselves with the scissors. So I try to take an X-Acto knife and make X's or somehow otherwise start the hole. And then they cut places for their fingers and their thumb, and I'm just doing this quickly for the sake of time. I'm not trying to make it look perfect or anything. All right, so now you have the ability to manipulate this with your fingers and thumb. Now, Venus flytraps have little hairs around the edges. And so I have them start cutting little triangles out around the edges after we fold the paper plate in half. So basically you're going to make it look like sun rays coming out of a setting sun. And if you do both at the same time, you don't have to cut all the way around the plant. So what we're making here are the hairs that go on the outside edge of the Venus flytrap. And what the hairs do is on cold days, things tend to move slower. Even we move slower when we're cold. Well, this plant is trying to catch an insect. And if it's a cold day and it moves too slowly, it'd be hard to catch one, kind of like you trying to catch a fly. All right. So we're going to make these root hairs, not these root hairs, these little hairs on the side of the, and we're going to fold them in. And you shall see the purpose of these little hairs. All right. So when the Venus flytrap is closing, if it closes too slowly because it's cold, these little hairs act like jail bars to trap the insect so it can't get away while the Venus flytrap finishes closing and exuding enzymes that digest the insect. So that's the purpose of the hairs. Now, to get the inside little hairs, you can take these leftover triangles and give them a little base, and then take some glue stick and glue a few on the inside of this. So after you glue several in, you're gonna have something that looks like this. All right, so these are little hairs. They're the trigger hairs. So when an insect walks by, if it touches one, the Venus flytrap doesn't react because it could have been a breeze for all the flytrap knew. But if it touches one hair twice, or it touches two different hairs pretty quickly, then the Venus flytrap knows to close. So then, to see how well the kids learned, you have them all put their Venus flytraps in the air, and you have them put their head down with their little mouth open, and you go around with the chopstick and you touch one of their fingers, because those are also little hairs. If they close after the first touch, you just walk on by. But if they wait till the second touch and they show you that they've learned something, then before you get the second touch going, you throw a raisin in there. They waited till the second touch, they caught an insect. And the kids really like that. So that's a Venus flytrap made out of a paper plate. It doesn't get much cheaper than that. Huh? No, I'm good. All right, these I think are like $7 or $10 a piece, and these are called fundanas. Now, normally I don't buy too much stuff, but these will last you forever, and these are all nature games basically. So what you do is you can divide the kids up. All right, let's just look at this one. Bug bingo. You divide the kids into teams, and the purpose of this is to have the kids go around and look to see if they can find these. So you'll have a team and they go out and they like, oh look, we looked under a log and we found some roly-poly larvae. All right, they were just like a little blob. They didn't even have legs or anything. They were just a larva. All right. See if you can find an insect home on a plant, so like a gall or a web. All right. Well, as they find these things, as they go around the garden and find these things, or around the pasture, wherever you are, they come back, and as a team, they put a rock or something in the space that they found something to go with. So if they found an insect shaped like part of a plant, and they were the rock team, they put a rock there, and then they go off to find something else. Another team might find a daddy long legs or something else that has really long legs, and they might be the bark team. So they'll put a piece of bark there. Another team might be the leaf team, and they find an insect with 2 or more colors, and they put a leaf there. So everybody has, or you could have different colored rocks, but each team has a little thing that represents their team. So the goal is to get bingo, all right? So whoever gets the bingo first wins, but after everyone's finished making a bingo, everybody comes back and sits in a circle, and they all share with the other teams what they saw. Like, oh, we saw a grasshopper that has legs made for jumping. We saw that in the pasture or in the park. And then the insect with 2 or more colors, we found a bumblebee, and that was over on some flower. And so when every team talks about everything they've seen, everybody gets to share, everybody gets to appreciate. And if there's something really special that one team found, then the whole group can walk over and share it together. So they all get to go out and hone their observation skills, and they also get to explore the environment. And it's also kind of a competition, but everybody wins. One thing they can do while they are out exploring as the kids are exploring, you can give them paint chip cards. Now, you can get these at any hardware store, big box store. Every time you go to the store, just try to figure out what kind of paint you want and just kind of collect these over the time, all right? So you'll end up with a lot of different colors of paint chip cards. when the kids are out there, you want them to slow down and observe. So you give each kid 1 or 2 paint chip cards, and they go around the garden and they try to find something that's that color. So let's say that the person who had the pink found this rose. Well, they're like, I think one of these colors is it. So they're like, nope, too dark. A little too dark. That looks pretty close. Yeah, I'd say that one is a fresh raspberry splash. All right, and then after they find one, they can share it with people. They can take a picture if they have a phone. They can take it back and put it in a pile if it's something they can carry with them. And then at the end, everybody can share the colors they found. And one kid one time had the pink card, and he actually found a a grasshopper with pink stripes on its legs that he probably wouldn't have noticed, except he was looking for pink. Then you have somebody with one of the green cards, and they find some oxalis. All right, so they're like, well, this doesn't match any of my greens, but there's another kid out there with a different set of greens. Nope, that doesn't really match my greens either. But here's a kid with darker greens, and that one's pretty close if you hold it up and look. That's bamboo forest green. And it's amazing how many shades you actually find out in the garden. So this is another good way to get them to observe. Besides like the Fundana bingo and stuff, this is another way to get them to slow down. And it's kind of a little contest, you know, who can match their color. And it's about as cheap as it gets, because you just go and pick up a few paint chips every time you go to the store. Now, there's several activities that require the kids to collect something, whether they're going to do leaf rubbings or whether they're going to keep their little paint chips. And when you're going around the garden and the kids are collecting, they have a tendency to over-collect, and they have a tendency to, here, hold this. And a teacher only has so many arms, all right? So one thing I do with the kids is I make them little satchels, basically, so they can carry their own stuff. So I take some paper sacks, round paper sacks, any size, and I cut the sealed end. I just cut off a little bit so it's no longer sealed shut. All right, so now it's open at both ends. All right, and then I fold it in half. So now you just have the bags and you folded them in half. And I put a couple staples on the side to hold it in place. All right, so now we have a little bag that has places in the between, okay, in between the stuff, within the old bag itself, between, and all this has a bottom, so nothing's gonna fall out. All right, so you basically have a little accordion file of pockets that you can put different things in. Now, to have them carry this, because I sure don't want to, not when I have like 25 kids, is I have them punch a hole through a few in the middle, just the ones in the middle, because we're gonna put a string around this, and they're gonna tie it around a part of their body. And the fewer that are layers that the string goes through, the easier it is for it to tear free from their body. So everybody gets a piece of string. The more colorful, the better. And they tie one end. Then we have another end. And most kids can tie knots, not a problem. All right, so now we have a little satchel that they can use that has places for them to put leaves, little rocks, whatever it is they want to collect. There's a whole big bag, several bags there. And they can write their name on it. And then they can put it around their neck, but it kind of makes me nervous. So I have them wear it like this. And that way it's still hands-free, but it's a lot safer than having it around their neck, because I'm always worried someone's going to choke themselves. But with this, if you pull hard enough, it's a safety feature. You just came right off. Okay, so that's to have them collect. Now, over the course of the week or the day or however long your camp is, the kids are gonna find little things like little rocks and stuff that they like, and they're gonna put them in a little cache somewhere. All right. So you can take a Sucrets or an Altoids or some kind of little metal container and make what we call pocket museums. All right. So this is a way for the kids to show off their little treasures when they go home or when their friends come over. So inside, we take pieces of felt and we glue them to the bottom and the top to make a nice little display case. And the kids have their little treasures. So like, this is a rock we painted. We used it for one of our markers on that Fundana game. And then somebody came to talk to us about rose rocks, which are found in Oklahoma, and they gave all of us a rose rock, which is a really cool little Oklahoma thing. This rock I picked up because it's got a little, you can use it as like a worry stone. It's got a little divot in it, and I just thought that was really cool, so I picked it up. This, we were walking across a pasture that had horses and cattle in it, and we think that's part of a horse tooth, because horses' teeth keep growing throughout their lives, and it might be part of their tooth. And so I just thought that was really cool, so I kept it. I also found a 4-leaf clover, so we pressed it, and after a couple days we put it on a piece of cardstock with some tape over it to keep it in good shape. And then there was this little trail that we did that was just on the OSU campus, and we went around and learned about different parts of the OSU campus. And after we finished answering all the questions, we went to the student union, and they gave us these little tokens for finishing the trail. It was about a 2-mile trail. So everyone got one of these as like a trophy for finishing the 2-mile-long scavenger hunt. And then this was a piece of one of the crafts we did. We made a lot of neat little crafts, and I just liked that, so I just kept it. So all these little things fit in my pocket museum. And so when I go home at the end of the summer or the week or the day, I can just pull out my little pocket museum and say, look what I found, and look what my favorite parts, my favorite memories of the camp are. So that's just the price of a piece of felt and an old Sucrets container. So if you know anybody who uses them, keep them. Okay, the next activity, when we talk about insects, we talk about the life cycles. And some insects go through metamorphosis. So if you have the complete metamorphosis, then you have the egg, and you have the larva, then you have the pupa, and then you have the adult. Now some kids see those posters of the 4 different stages and think those are actually 4 different insects. They don't get that one insect is going through all those stages. So we take an old tube sock, and we take a piece of fabric that we cut into little wings, and using fabric markers, we can either draw on some eyeballs or we can sew on some little buttons. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a metamorphosis puppet. So, all right, so after an egg hatches, it hatches into a caterpillar. And what's the job of a caterpillar? To eat and grow, right? So as he eats and grows, he gets longer and longer and longer, all right? And here's his little legs, all right? He's eating and eating and eating and crawling around and eating. And then, after he's done growing as big as he's going to be, he turns into a little pupa. And at that point, you just see a little ugly white things in the ground or on the ground, all right? And they're just in the process of turning into their final adult form. So after they finish going through the pupa stage, they hatch into an adult. So when you turn it inside out, you have a butterfly in this case, all right? So you have the wings, and then you have the little legs that we drew on the sides. But that way the kids can see that it's one animal going through all the phases. And it's a cool little puppet. So all that requires is a sock, some fabric markers, and with the little wings, you can either, it's easier with kids to just either Velcro them on or use a bobby pin, or a safety pin rather than sewing them. Or even stitch witchery, I guess. So that is Metamorphosis Puppet. There's probably more for the older kids because it takes some patience. All right, if you want to keep talking about insects and you want to go catch some so you can study them, entomologists have little aspirators that they go and they walk up to a tree or to wherever an animal, a little insect is, and they have a little tube that they suck on, and the insect falls down into a little chamber so they can take it and study it. So we can make a little chamber. You find some clear container. Now you can order what look like old film canisters, film strip canisters that are clear, or you can find, like if you eat pimento cheese or something, you can get an old container like that, as long as it's clear, all right? And we're gonna use this as a chamber to catch bugs with. So, we just need some aquarium tubing, and I cut it into like 10 to 12 inch sections, just aquarium tubing you can get by like the 25-foot roll. And I punch 2 holes in the lid. Actually, I use a drill press just to be faster, but the idea is you want 2 holes. So with one of your pieces of aquarium tubing, you're going to stick it in the hole so that it comes out about 1 inch on the other side. And the other one, you're going to take a piece of cheesecloth, just a little square, and you're going to cover the end of the other aquarium tubing, and you're going to masking tape it so that it stays on. So basically this one is a piece of aquarium tubing, but it's got a piece of cheesecloth or gauze over it. And that one pokes through so that the gauze ends up on the inside of the container. So now on the bottom, you have 1 piece of aquarium tubing that's plain and 1 piece of aquarium tubing that is covered in gauze. And there's a reason for that. When you put the lid with your little aquarium tubing back on, you're creating a little chamber, and with the aquarium tubing, it makes a good seal, so that when you suck on one of these, you can use the other end to get an insect. Now, this is cool because it's idiot-proof. If you suck on the one that is going to pick up the insect instead of the one that you're supposed to suck on, you're going to get an insect that gets stuck before it hits the gauze. So it's not going to end up in the chamber, but it's not going to end up in your mouth either. If you suck on the one that has the gauze, and this one's unimpeded, then the insect will come up and get caught in the chamber. So no matter which one you suck on, it's not going to end up in your mouth. All right. So before we go out and try to catch ants or chiggers or anything really small, and that's the other reason we use aquarium tubing, so no one tries to suck up a bumblebee or something, we practice. Some little kids don't know how to suck on a straw, so we practice. So I put out some rice, which I like to call practice maggots, because if you call it something cool, the kids all think it's really neat. And again, you suck on the one that has the gauze on it, and then you aim the other one. So after you suck them up, if you notice, they're in there. All right, so those would be insects that are caught in the chamber. And then you could just look at them through the chamber, or if they're safe, like little beetles or something, you could look at them like this, and then you'll never have to touch them. And then when you're done, you can just release them back out into the wild. So it's a really fun little activity, and especially if you get kids that are really hyper, I don't know why, but they will dump out rice in a big pile and suck it all up, and then dump it out again and suck it all up and dump it out again. I have no idea why they like to do that, but it uses energy, so hey, I'm all for it. All right, now some of those plants you collected, especially if you've had time, if the camp's like a week or 2 weeks, you can make the kids little plant presses. Now you can make them out of cardboard and newspaper. I just took some pegboard and cut them up for the students, and I made them about the size of an 8.5, 11 sheet of paper. And then you can get these little Velcro strips, or you can just use pieces of twine, or you don't even need anything. You can just put something heavy on top of the pile. But all that is for a plant press, collecting plants. You don't have to get an expensive one. You can also use these holes to run bolts through with little butterfly nuts, so that they can just screw them tightly if you want to. Basically, as long as it has absorbent paper and pressure on top, just make whatever you want. All right, so I took pegboard, and then this is absorbent like watercolor paper and newspaper, basically anything that's absorbent, because when you collect plants to press, you want to get rid of the water. All right, so somewhere in here. So over the winter time, we had some jasmine bushes on campus that flowered with hundreds and hundreds of flowers. So since I don't want the kids completely stripping the garden when they come for garden camp, I went ahead and pressed a couple hundred of these things. All right. All right, and the reason we press the flowers is to keep them. All right, and we keep them to make flower bookmarks. Now they have kits you can buy online that are a couple bucks a kid. They give you the pressed flowers, they give you the names to go with them, and you make a nice little bookmark. But it's not cheap, and if the kids mess up, they get really upset, you know, that they put the wrong name on the wrong flower, or it didn't turn out perfect, or whatever. Well, to save money, we can make our own flower bookmarks. Here's an example of one that we did a couple years ago. And the flowers don't have to be like flowers. They can be wildflowers. They can be weeds. As long as it's colorful. I mean, it could even be oxalis or, you know, 3-leaf clover. So I took a roll of contact paper, and I cut it into sections so that when you fold it in half, it's about the size of a bookmark. And so what we're going to do is all the flowers and whatever plant parts the kids collected, we're going to take them and we're going to make our own bookmark. Now what I try to do is just take half of the sticky off. All right, I try to just take half off, because when kids are using contact paper, it gets frustrating if it all gets wadded up and all that. So we just expose half the contact paper, and then whatever flowers they've gathered or whatever leaves they've gathered or whatever they like, they can just put on the contact paper. And they can put them in different directions. You know, and ideally they would have multiple different kinds of flowers. And if they want all of one, it's okay. This is all about them. All right, so I'm going to fill it up with these little yellow flowers. Make sure they're sticking pretty good. All right, and once they have it like they want it, then they can pull the other half off. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. You got to be pretty patient with this. You make sure you fold it in half, lay it over your flowers, and press it down as good as you can. All right. Now, there's still some bubbles, and it didn't overlap perfectly, but that's what scissors are for. You can trim it around the edges. All right. Trim it as narrow as you want, as wide as you want, whatever. And once you have them all in the middle, you give the kid a hole punch. If they want, they don't have to. If they want to make a bookmark, they punch a hole. And they put yarn through it. And some kids just want to tie a knot, but I'll show them how to do this also. All right, so there you have a little floral bookmark, and they can give it to their mom or their sister or their dad, or they can use it themselves. They can give it to a teacher. They can even use it, you know, hanging on a window and have a little stained glass window to look at. So whatever they want to do with it, but if they have pressed the flowers that they collected, then it's pretty neat for them, and they have a nice little memory. Another thing you can do is make bookmarks, or, you know, you could make a bigger one and frame it or something, is you can use watercolor paper because it's really absorbent, and we make what are called watercolor bookmarks. So again, we don't want to bring back the whole garden when the kids go collect, because when you make watercolor bookmarks, you only need really thin pieces. You're not going to try to put a blueberry on there or something, all right? So I give them a piece of painter's tape because it peels off easily, and I give them one that's about as long as the bookmark. And they go out to the garden and they collect petals, little leaves, little flower parts, whatever they want. And they put it on here. And when you can't see blue anymore, that means you're done, all right? And you only want it to be like one layer thick. For little kids, you could even make a little bracelet that they could wear, and they could just stick stuff on as they're outside. But again, it's a piece of tape. You're not gonna collect, you're not gonna over collect. And so this one you need fresh flowers for. So let me go get the fresh flowers. You need fresh flowers because you're gonna pound the juice out of them, and so you can't use pressed flowers for this. All right, so this is a little rose. It looked a lot better about an hour ago. But you can't smash the whole rose, but you can take some petals and you can put them on the painter's tape. And then just one petal is plenty. You don't want to put the whole flower on there. All right. And use some of the inner petals. And it doesn't matter if there's like a little imperfection in the flower petal, it doesn't matter. I also like leaves, so I'll take one of the rose leaves, put it on there. And then I found some oxalis, which is just a really common weed, but it looks cool. And I can either just put it on there flat, or I can spread it out so the little petals are on there individually. Sometimes it's frustrating with all the stickiness. Ow. I had to pick a rose. All right. So there's little leaves. Put another oxalis. All right. So what you do is after the kids come back, and a lot of times these come back fully loaded, it has to be a living tissue. It can't be a dried up brown leaf or anything. But the more different colors you get, the cooler it's gonna be. All right, so this is where the fun part comes in. You take your painter's tape with your little flower parts and your leaves, and you lay it on watercolor paper. And this is where the real fun part is. Now, normally I don't do these on tables, but since this is a lab bench, I can't hurt it. All right, so normally we do this on, it's okay. All right, they can still see. All right, we put it on a flat surface. All right. And you peel it carefully. I didn't get very good, so I'm going to do it again.
You are to leave the building by the nearest exit or exit stairway. Do not use the elevators.
Yeah, that didn't come out well. And sometimes you get... Didn't pound it enough. Need a kid for that. But when you peel it, sometimes you get the positive and sometimes you get the negative, and you never know what it is you're going to get. So it's really cool. And the more different colors you can find, the better. Now, if yours turns out like this, and you're disappointed, that's why we have stamps. That's why we have stamps.
Fire emergency in the building. You are to leave the building by the nearest exit or exit stairway. Do not use the elevators.
This way kids aren't completely upset.
There is a fire emergency in the building. You are to leave the building by the
Yep.
nearest exit.
Yep, so if the kids can't get real plant juice for some reason, or they don't pound hard enough, or they're just not good at it like me, you can give them stamps with ink, and they can still have something to take home and they won't be all upset. All right, because they get really upset when it turns out like that. And so all we do to get this watercolor paper is I just take the big sheets and I cut them about 2 inches wide. And so I just make a lot of strips of watercolor paper. And then when it's done, you can punch a hole in it. And you can put another piece of yarn or a piece of raffia or whatever you want. All right?
Tell them we're going to go.
What?
Tell them goodbye.
I'm not done. All right. This is why you have to be flexible as a teacher. The next thing we're going to do, which the kids really like, is we're going to grow some hairy caterpillars. All right? A lot of people take hose and they make little heads full of soil and grass, and then they decorate the head and have the little tail hanging in a pot. We're not going to do that.
There is a fire emergency in the building. You are to
This is a test, so we don't have to evacuate the building, just in case you're wondering.
stairway. Do not use the elevators.
All right. I usually do this in pairs with the kids. So one kid can hold it open, and the other kid can put the potting soil in. Then we add grass seed. This is just Bermuda grass seed. And we just kind of have them mix it until it goes throughout the whole. And I probably should have put some in the bottom too, but I'm kind of agitated right now. All right, so you mix it up. Now, I used to have the kids tie a knot, do another thing of potting soil and grass seed, tie a knot, but with little kids, you don't want knots because you'll be undoing them and redoing them. So I basically have them make a potato. All right? And instead of having them do the knots, because every time you do a knot, hopefully you remember the soil and the grass seed. And if you didn't remember one or the other, then you got to undo the knot and get all the way back there. But by making a potato, you can use pipe cleaners to make the legs and the sections. Make sure you have the same color for everybody, or there will be fights. All right, so now you have the body. For the antennae, you take a bobby pin, you open it up to make a V, and then you poke it in, poke it through, and poke it out. And then you have antennae. Then with a hot glue gun, which of course I forgot to plug in because I'm distracted, you glue little eyeballs on. All right. And then if you put it on a styrofoam plate or something else that won't absorb the water, you just pour water. And you make sure it stays moist all the days you're there. And eventually it's going to grow a little grassy hair, and you can cut it with a pair of scissors, which the kids love. So that's an easy grass growing caterpillar activity. And we have one more activity. When you talk to the kids, not every plant grows from seeds. Some plants you can grow vegetatively, like pothos or Mexican hat plant, for example. All right? Mexican hat plant, which is also called the mother of thousands, has these little bitty babies on the side. And these actually have their little roots, if you can see that. And these just fall off the parent plant onto the soil. Okay, so what I do is I get a little dish and I start these little guys before the kids get there. And then what they do is they can come pick one up, you know, get enough that it's got the roots. And then I give them these little pots that I get on discount, like 10 cents a piece. And you show them how to plant it. And then they already start pretty decent size, so after a couple of weeks, or if you have a summer-long camp, by the end of the summer, you're going to have a big plant. But that just shows them that some plants don't make flowers, and they don't make seeds, and they just have their little babies ready to come off, just like airplane plants. So that just opens up their eyes to the fact that not everything propagates with seeds. Well, I hope you stuck with us through the fire drill. And thanks for participating in this Garden Day Camp Fun. Usually we do all this together and we have a blast, but we can't this summer. So hopefully if you have been to this conference before, you've gotten to experience this. And if you haven't, hopefully we'll see you next year, wherever that is, hopefully not online. So I'm Shelly Mitchell and I'm from Oklahoma State, and thanks for being part of my session.
Thank you for participating in Day Camp Fun session today as part of the American Horticultural Society's 28th National Children and Youth Garden Symposium. We would also like to recognize our diamond sponsor, Ball Horticultural, for their long-standing support of this important annual event. Gold sponsor, Longwood Gardens, has supported NCYGS for the past 3 years. Both Ball and Longwood have helped in facilitating our ability to present this year's symposium virtually. Thanks again.